Hello, Comp One. The last time we were together, we were talking about something called rhetorical invention. It's the first of the 5 houses, and they are, again, invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. What I want to talk to you about today, it's the season where flies want to be in the house, October, is something called rhetorical arrangement. And there's 3 or 4 lessons that I'm going to offer you on that. There's 3 or 4 things that I want to communicate to you that I think are important about it. It'll be nowhere near what I really know about it and how I think about it in detail, but it'll give you an idea. Arrangement is the house where we start to think about the form that something takes, especially something that's written. Red squirrel. I want to say too that when I used to talk about form with my students, I used to waste their time. I used to walk into the room and write on the board content versus form and ask them, what's most important? Is it most important to have strong content or strong form? It was a waste of their time because year after year after year, they'd get to the end of the lesson and they would say, hey, you know what? They both go hand in hand. You've got to have something looking good on paper, and what good is it if you don't have any real ideas as a writer? Now, the first thing I want to talk to you about today regarding arrangement is the idea that people's arrangement patterns with discourse really depends upon where they're from in the world. And this is kind of a moment for us to celebrate all the different kinds of people that we have in Crow Wing County and the different people that we have at Central Lakes College. I can, for instance, let you know that we obviously think differently maybe in Minnesota than people from the other side of the world. It's not a hard concept to get your head around. To get us going, I'd like to start out with a joke. I'm not very funny, but I like telling jokes. Maybe you've heard the one about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. The one about where they tried to sneak into a pub. The problem is they were a little bit too young. So on a Friday night, they went across the Potomac River. They got up to the pub and there was a bouncer there. He said, you guys look kind of young. I think I'm going to need to see some identification. Thomas Jefferson, he was in luck. He had a really cool, fake plastic ID that he got from John Adams. Bouncer looked at it and he said, you're in. What about you? He said to George. Do you have any ID? And George, he just took out a quarter. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, does he have any idea how much that joke sucks? The answer is yes. I know how weak the joke is, but to make the point, that's a Western joke. It's like all Western discourse. It actually looks like this. Western discourse is characterized by direction, okay? It goes in a straight line. There's an intro, there's a middle, and there's an end, okay? It's not that hard to understand. Everything goes like this in our culture. In this part of the United States, in Canada, in most parts of Europe, we think in a straight line with an intro, a middle, and an end. That joke was terrible, but it still follows the rhetorical pattern of the West, the arrangement pattern of the West. If I just turned on this little camera and said, you know, started out by just saying George took out a quarter, that wouldn't mean anything. It would be even, well, worse than the joke actually was. On the other side of the world, in the part of the world that we could call Asia, in China, in Japan, in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, rhetorical patterns look very, very different. They don't argue in a straight line. They don't arrange their discourse like that with an intro, a middle, and an end. Asian discourse actually is circular, okay? It is circular in nature. They argue in a circle. They speak and think in circles. It has something to do with, I don't know what, they're drinking water, just the way things are over there. Also a little bit to do with their natural politeness. In Western discourse, you make a point and you back it up. That's what you'll do in a persuasive paper, for instance. In Asia, on the other side of the world, they don't argue from the point. They argue towards the point in a circle. One of the most perfect examples I ever got on this was a paper that I got from a Vietnamese student years ago. He had a 4-paragraph paper, not 5. In the first paragraph, he talked about a rug that some relative had given him. There was another paragraph that talked about a watch. Yet another paragraph about a tennis racket, I believe. This is 20 years ago, but I can remember it clearly. Only, excuse me, at the very end of the paper, Only with the last sentence of that paper did he say, "My God, am I homesick? My God, am I homesick?" You must see the difference. The Western person, sorry for the primitive paper, they're going to say, I'm homesick, and here are all the reasons why. But an Asian person from the other side of the world is going to do it very differently. He's going to argue in a circle and say, here are all of the reasons that I'm homesick. I've read that if you tell a child on the other side of the world to draw a dragon, they will, but they'll start with the tail. In China, for instance, they'll go round and round and round, and only at the very end will they put the eye on that dragon and give it all the fierce teeth and everything. Well, I remember when my 14-year-old son William would draw dragons, he always started at the head, made him just as fierce as possible, and ended with the tail. It's just a little bit different way of thinking. Now, this semester I don't have a lot of Latino students. At my other job at the College of St. Benedict, I do have a very interesting young man named Hector Juarez, and I'm very curious to read his first essay this fall, because I have a funny feeling it is going to reflect Spanish rhetorical patterns, which, believe it or not, kind of looks like this. All of the Spanish students I've had in my 25 years of being a teacher have been very famous for writing in a digressive way, a digression way. They get ideas. I don't know, it has something to do with the culture, but people who think in Spanish, who speak in Spanish, people from Mexico, Central America, people from Spain, South America, they have this way of digressing, of finding new topics. Now, I haven't seen it yet, but when I ask Hector Juarez to write his first paper, I have a pretty good idea that he's going to write 3, maybe 4. He's going to be writing along, and just because of the culture that he's from, he's going to get a new idea, and he's going to write about that and digress from one topic to another. The most important thing I want to tell you is that in the same way you've heard me say before, we are all brothers and sisters. You know this. We are all brothers and sisters in life, and we are also brothers and sisters in rhetorical theory. None of us are any better than the others, than others. We're bound by our humanity. And the last thing I would do is say that Western people write in a way that's better than Asian people, or better than Latino people, or Hispanic people. I'd never say that. I would simply say that culture is one of the ways that we can think about people communicating and people behaving rhetorically. Language reflects culture, culture reflects language. The interesting thing to do is to just, if you ever meet someone from Asia and find them thinking indirectly in a circle, you can just celebrate and go, wow, isn't that cool? I've seen these rhetorical patterns on paper for years. There's also a Bantu rhetoric. I know that there's a Semitic rhetoric for people that live in, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq. They're famous for parallel structures. But the big point of this lesson, now that I'm at 8.5 minutes and should tie it up, is that arrangement, actually, and how you do it, how you arrange your discourse, your novels, your essays, your poetry, it's going to depend a little bit on the culture that you come from. And what's interesting is that when an Asian student comes here, and I just met one the other day in the Central Lakes Library, at the John Hassler Library, I said, where are you from? She said, Shanghai. I just want to be that student's teacher right now. She's an Asian woman, not from around here. And she's probably going to have to adapt to Comp 1 and Comp 2's world. In the same way that if you went to Japan or China, you would probably have to learn how to think and behave in ways that are appropriate for those cultures. Same thing with my friend Hector Juarez. He can digress all he wants, but eventually I've got to nudge him towards saying, hey, man, you're in the States now. This is how we write, at least in academic discourse communities. In his journal, I'll let him digress to smithereens. It's a great place to do it. This is my first lesson on arrangement. I got a few more. And like you'll note in a news item, this is one of my last videos that I'm going to do with my iPhone. I love it to death, but the video quality is not the greatest. And hoping to get a high-def camera here pretty soon, either with faculty development funds from Central Lakes College, or maybe I'll just sort of sneak into my wife's study there and just grab that credit card. I can see it from here. I can smell it. See you in the next lesson. I got a few things to tell you about arrangement.